Okay, philosophy of the day. Let me find a nice space in the sun, out of the way of the wind. So, what we find, we all know this. First of all, let me just say this. Let me just clear the ground. There are people with closed minds, indoctrinated minds, and there are people with open, broad minds which don't have any biases. They're not programmed. They are relative free thinkers, and those people will see the world in a very, very different way. So, again, we always have to make disclaimers when we're talking about things, people, because there are so many considerations to consider. And it's like when anybody asked Jordan Peterson, do you believe in God? He said, well, depends what you mean by God. We've got to establish that. And so what I've said in other videos is, what I always endeavour to do is to go to the root of my being, to the root of my experience and the root of my knowledge. And then I will speak from there. And then I can come forward incrementally to involve the conversation more within the illusion. But ultimately, at the source, there's nothing but awareness. And so then we come forward from awareness into consciousness, and then out of consciousness derives human ego. And then out of human ego comes concepts and biases and indoctrinations and all the rest of the pollutions that some of us are aware of. Lots of people, they have no awareness at all that they have been completely and utterly indoctrinated and hypnotized from birth. And then they want to lay claim to what they think they know, and it's like, I know this and you don't know that, and well, there's no point in even engaging a higher intellect. There's no point in engaging with lower intellects. And so even when I've got my regular viewers, people that have been watching me for years, it's very apparent that you still have hardly any clue where I'm actually coming from. And I just find that astounding. And I wonder what is lacking, what is missing, what is the problem. Because evidently I don't have any of those problems. I don't have any of those issues of how you can't comprehend what I'm speaking about, other than the fact you're not in the same outer parameter of consciousness as me. So you can't see what I'm speaking about, and therefore some of you will level at me woo-woo and project that I'm fantasizing about crystal balls and all this sort of thing. When I say to you people, there is nothing that I am saying which hasn't been spoken about for thousands of years in some sort of shape or form. There are slight modifications, and there are things that I'm addressing, and there are questions that I'm asking that I haven't personally come upon, and so at the very least it's new to me. And evidently lots of this stuff is new to you, otherwise you might want to question it. But lots of you have read the book and you've got no questions at all. And I just think it's because you just don't comprehend the magnitude of the things that I'm saying. Now, in my chapter now, chapter 4, I'm asking, what has love got to do with it? What's love got to do with the universe, the cosmos, humanity? And I speak from my personal experience of, as far as every cell in my body and my consciousness is aware, I have been spoken to by Jehovah of the Old Testament, by Jesus of the New Testament. And they exhibited their variety of love. And what I discerned was that their love is very different from each other's. And their love, what I felt from them, was very in keeping with what I had discerned from the Old and the New Testament. In the Old Testament, Jehovah is supposed to love his people, love the chosen ones, and yet he couldn't think of enough reasons to slaughter them. And people actually believe this is the word of God, and they just have a pathetic, ridiculous, small-minded and unintelligent adherence to it, and it is laughable beyond conception. But they have it. These are the people that don't have free-thinking minds, that just have been indoctrinated. They're just programs. And of course we need these people, because if they weren't around, then there could be no geniuses. And so, you know, we use them to measure, you know, how profound our thinking is. And so, when I felt the love of Jehovah, it was a conditional love, and Jehovah chastised me for 3.5 hours because I wasn't recognizing his love, the love that he'd been conveying, the love of the cosmos, the love of the Old Testament. Somewhere, somehow, he seemed to consider that there was love being exhibited in that. But in my estimation, having read it plenty of times, I couldn't see it. However, the love of Jesus was very different, and when we read the New Testament, it's very easy to see and feel the love what Jesus was exhibiting. And so I'm not a fool here, people, and it's not like, you know, I'm blind and I can't see it and I can't feel it. No, I'm very, very awake and aware, and even reading and then feeling, those two things very much went together. So in the Old Testament, you've got the overpowering conditional love of God, telling us that if we don't love him, then he'll smite us and send us to hell. Oh, great. So, well, I mean, it would be nice to have a choice, God, but I suppose, you know, being a dictator, you're not offering that facility. Just stupid. Then somebody, the wise people of the times, they got together and they said to themselves, look, I mean, all this shit that we've wrote about God, no one's going to buy that. A heinous, you know, jealous, bullshit, trouble-causing murderer. Who the fuck in their right mind would have an allegiance to him other than complete fucking donuts? So let's write something else. Oh, let's bring the sun in. And, you know, can't you see that when we've got cartoons and movies these days, we have He-Man, and then we have Son of He-Man, and then we have, like, Iron Man, and then we have Iron Man 2, and, you know, brother of Iron Man, cousin of Iron Man, son of Iron Man. You know, just sequels, people. And so the Bible is no different. It's just a sequel, only it's coming at the idiots from a different level. And so they softened it because they realised that that hard love, that tough love, just wasn't working. People were going, fuck you. And so then when Jesus came along, then he's speaking about unconditional love, and he exhibited unconditional love, and he never found a problem with anybody, maybe except the Pharisees, because they were counting money in the wrong place. But other than that, you know, it was peace and love, man, to everyone. And so that's exactly what I felt when I had him, his essence, his tulpa, whatever it was, visit me on that day. And so people will say to me, oh, level at me anything, like, you know, or you can think that, you know, in your jealousy, in your naivety, people will go, oh, it's drugs. Well, I'm telling you, you know, the vast majority of these things, they weren't drug-induced. And, you know, if we are really getting down to drugs, well, I mean, all drugs let's just speak about psilocybin, and let's speak about DMT. Well, there are receptors in our brains and in our bodies for those chemicals, and so we have evidently been ingesting them or producing them, and we actually do produce DMT, by the way. And so they're our drugs. So if we're high on drugs, well, they're our drugs. They're God's drugs, and so God created those drugs within us, and when we take a good dose of them, then we can see a little bit more of what God is. And so I look at the unconditional love of Jehovah, and then I look at the conditional love of Jehovah and the unconditional love of Jesus, and I go, well, I know which one I would choose. And so you think, well, okay, go with the conditional one, because the other one's bullshit. They've got too many conditions. It's like reading, what one of Herman Himmler's new criteria to abide by. You've got rules of jurisdiction, a mile long. And so I take that and I go, well, okay, what do I make of that? Where can I see that? Can I see the love of those two entities? Let's take Jehovah for a start. Can I see evidence of that love? Yeah, I can see that all day long, every day. What love are you speaking about, Mr. Awake and Brave? I'm speaking about conditional love. The love that we will exhibit and we will give and bless people with when we are getting our own way. And that's just Jehovah all over. As long as he's getting his own way and everyone's bowing down to him and licking his asshole, then, he will exhibit his variety of love, which is basically that he won't kill you. That's what his love is. Jesus' love, on the other hand, can I see that around the world, humanity? No. Have you ever seen it coming from a human being? No. Have you ever even come close to feeling this unconditional love? No, because I don't remember what the love of my mother was. But the way I see it, and the way I love, then I would think that the closest we would get to Jesus' unconditional love is with our children. And that's probably when they're young, because then we start to judge them when they get older and they start to do things that we don't like. They start to become their own person, their own individuated being, and if it doesn't comply with our rules and regulations and the way we want them to be, then, oh dear, our love has gone. And so, when you look at things like that, when you express that, when you speak about that, and when you make comparisons like that, I look around the world and I've read a lot of stuff, and I have never, ever, ever in my whole life come upon anybody just simply looking at that. It seems the most rudimentary, the most mundane thing to do. We evidently have two different varieties of expression of love. From the Old Testament to the New Testament. They are absolutely chalk and cheese, and yet nobody has ever mentioned that. Why? Why haven't they ever seen that distinction? Why have I had the opportunity, privilege, to experience both of those viscerally, emotionally, mentally, physically? Why have I had that gift, and all these people banging on about God and Jesus for all their lives, they've never had it? Well, I can't answer that. But all I can do is speak about what I've experienced. And I bring things together in a very reasonable and rational way. And if anybody thinks that there's a problem with that hypothesis, then I'm all ears. But of course there never will be. Because the way I'm thinking evidently is just too vast to comprehend for, the minions. It really is. Because if I put a video up about a fucking pizza, then, everyone's over it like flies around shit. But videos like this, it's just like, there's too much. It's just too much. You're speaking too slow. You're using long words. You're speaking philosophically, psychologically, spiritually. Oh my God, we don't have those programs. We don't have those gifts. Can you talk to us about pizza and beer? We know about that. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. And so, when we look then, you know, what's going on here, and we see that even that distinction isn't readily accepted, then what I say to myself is, well, how on earth is anybody like me, who is a thinking person, going to discern what love actually is? I just look and I ask myself, what is love? Everyone's bounding this concept around love, 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 peace and love. I love you, you love me, I love chocolate, I love tea, I love the sunshine, I love holidays. What do you mean? You know, I've never got to the bottom of it, because if you ask anybody, they can never ever tell you what they mean. Because this concept of love is just a shapeshifter. It's so elusive and so evasive that it will never ever be nailed down. And so what I do then with my brilliant brain and my God consciousness, then I put something together, you know, which is beautiful again. And I go to myself, well, if we can't define love, I ask myself the question, what else can't we define? We can't define God. How many people can definitively define God? They can't. God, the concept, the notion is indefinable. And so what else can't we define? Consciousness. Oh, okay, hang on, there's a pattern forming here. We've got consciousness, which nobody has ever managed to define. We've got love, which nobody has ever managed to define. They've waxed lyrical, poetically about it, writing songs and poems and all sort of things, but they've never defined love, which is going to be readily acceptable for everybody. And then we've got consciousness. So we've got God, we've got consciousness, and we've got love, and they're all indefinable. So I say to myself then, well, it seems perfectly a reasonable assumption, conclusion, to derive that they are all the same thing. God is consciousness and is love. Now, when I have had the privilege of experiencing God, Jehovah, and love with my consciousness, whilst on psilocybin magic mushrooms, entheogens, which means to be with God, then I knew that they were all one. Because this human fiction, at the very, very fundamental premise, am pure awareness. I also am pure consciousness. Consciousness is the thinking awareness. Then I am pure love, fundamentally, because the universe fundamentally does appear to be love. I've experienced this on one of my psilocybin experiences where God was speaking to me. Before he was chastising me, the mushrooms, whatever spirit that was, which was a much more benevolent spirit, it was probably God. It could have been God, just like just chilling. But when he was upset, then he changed. And so I was being shown that every single thing was love. The sun kissing the leaves dancing, the grass blowing, the cool breeze with a warm hint within it, the hues and the texture and the odours and everything. My perception, it was all God, and I could see it and I could feel it and I was with it, and I couldn't deny it. God showed me that the world, in fact, the cosmos, in fact, is all love. And any problem that humans have with the world is down to their ego. The ego is the false the false entity, the operating system to this illusion. We have to have an ego to create this fiction. And that's what the ego does. It's nothing more than a computer screen. It's the interface between God. So our ego is the interface between God's creation, this world. And so we then, via our ego, we label things and we give things concepts, and we divide and create distinction between everything. But ultimately there is no distinction between nothing. It's all one, we are all one, and we're all in the mind of God. And so just here in this small video, 20-minute video, I've laid some bombs on you people. And can you get your heads around this way of thinking? Do you have any allegiance with them? Do you have any problems with what I'm saying here? Because as far as I can see with my logic, they are irrefutable. If we absolutely do not know what consciousness is, we absolutely cannot define what love is and what God is, then they all, to me, embroil themselves with one another. And that's within the realm of the unknown. Those things are incomprehensible to human ego, but they're not incomprehensible to human spirit, because human spirit is God's spirit. And so when we step outside of our ego, and when we enter into the depths of our being, and we come home to that which is us fundamentally, we discover that's pure awareness. And when we are in the deepest of meditations, we discover this pure awareness. There is nothing else there, everything disappears. And that's one of the reasons people who have experienced these deep meditative states know that this world is an illusion. Now I will lay another bomb on you guys and gals, and I'll say that in one of the deepest meditations that I've ever had, which lasted for about 3 hours, I went into the abyss, and it was pure awareness where there was no concept, a notion and consciousness of anything at all. There was just awareness aware of itself. Within that awareness saw what has been described in quantum string theory as tiny little flickering rubber bands created out of electricity. They're supposed to be trillions of times smaller than atoms. In this deep meditation, awareness was privy to seeing that. And awareness watched that for 20 minutes. And then awareness slipped away, or was superseded by the ego. The ego came back online and sent awareness packing, or sent awareness back into the unconscious realm, or the primal realm. Because when ego comes on, it supersedes everything else, because it has to engage its operating system with what's going on around it, consciously instead of unconsciously. So what I discerned from that wonderful meditative experience was the collapsing of the probable wave function, the probability, the quantum field of probability. What happens is that the quantum field of probability is conscious, and consciousness can create whatever it so desires, because all it needs to do is to think things into being. And so these quantum strings are reputedly to be conscious. The whole quantum field, just listen to John Hagelin, and he's like something to do with the transcendental meditation. He may be the CEO. He works with the film producer. If you have a golf ball sized consciousness, then you have a golf ball sized awareness. What's that dude's name? I'll think about it later, but you know who I mean, yeah? And So when I was in that, when my ego had gone offline and I was back at source, I had gone back to where everybody, every spiritual person, the Kabbalists and the Buddhists and everybody, they all endeavour to have this unity with God. And God is pure awareness. I was there, I was unified with God. But then the ego came on board online, and then the ego, my consciousness, collapsed the probable wave function into this world as we see it. And so again, I experienced what physics have been saying for over 100 years in one of my meditations. And so I can speak with the deepest and most profoundest of experience, and I can labour this, and I have done in my book, how this came about and what this means. But for those of you that don't have any knowledge of quantum string theory, you don't have any knowledge of the pure awareness and the abyss of consciousness, and you all you have is an egoic awareness, you are just living in the fiction. You are completely programmed and hypnotized, and you don't have the conscious wherewithal to be able to decipher what is happening. You don't have God consciousness. And so any of you that have got a problem about I'm speaking woo is because you're riddled with jealousy and some sort of hate, because what I'm saying flies in the face of whatever you think you know. You don't know anything unless you know that. And I'm not speaking like I know I'm the only one that knows. All I'm doing, and I've shown you what I've just done, I have brought what physics know, what the greatest physicists on the planet have hypothesized about, and I've told you how I've experienced that, how my consciousness, my expansive consciousness has experienced that. And then when we partake in higher levels of our own drugs, DMT, when we engage with that, then of course we are privy to more of God's mind, because we step outside of the ego. The ego effectively dies. This used to be a vogue concept and saying, did you have ego death? You know, all that means is that did you go somewhere else with your consciousness where ego wasn't there? Yes, a myriad times I've done that. And so I know that the ego is just a program, and I know that I am not the ego, and I know that consciousness is what we really are, can experience a billion different varieties and levels of vibration and states of awareness and consciousness. And so I've had scores of these different states, and so that's why I don't cling on to this egoic thing, which is just a fiction. And I know it's a fiction, the same as lots of other people do. And you know, if you people out there don't want me to speak like this, like I'm speaking to you like kids, or I'm speaking derogatory to you, then you've got to stand the fuck up, and you've got to put something down, and you've got to express what you think you know, or just tell me what you've experienced, because I don't want to know what you think you know. I'm coming from experience. I'm coming from a conscious level of reality. And then I'm coupling up things that have come from the ego. The ego has deciphered this illusion, and there are rules and laws in the illusion, and that's why science on one level is true, but it's kind of like it's true enough, because there are levels which you go beyond ego where it isn't true at all. It's just a fiction. And you could just, you know, draw this simile with yourselves. When you go to sleep each night and you have a dream, when you are in the dream, when your unconsciousness is dreaming, it thinks that it's absolutely real. But then when you wake up, you realise that it was only a dream. And what I've been saying all of these years is that this waking thing is exactly the same. It's just a dream. Because when we leave this tiny slither of consciousness, we enter into a vast realm of other worlds, other conscious worlds. And we can do them with the ingestion of many, many substances. We can enter into another world just by breathing. We can enter into other worlds by being highly stressed, by being super, super ecstatic. We shift states of consciousness and we end in different places. So with all that being said, what I've come to learn is that this thing here isn't any thing per se. There is no reality to it. There's only reality to it if you buy into a certain rule set. If you buy into biology, biology is true to you. If you buy into physics, physics is true to you. If you buy into chemistry, chemistry is true to you. And you know, we go on and on and on and on. Look at all these people that have got this myopic vision in their little narrow parameter of consciousness. And that's their world. And then people speak from that world. Like Bruce Lipton, he's a biologist, so he speaks from what he's come to glean from his biology. And his hypothesis, he's only got one, but it's quite a good one. Through his experimenting, he has discerned that our cells do not have any genetic predisposition per se. That our cells are governed by our environment, and when we shift environment, then we will have a different outcome of how our cell is going to develop. And so there is no such thing as hereditary per se, unless you believe that, or unless if your father had a certain disposition and then you've got a certain disposition because you live in the same environment. Well, what I would suggest that you do is change that environment. If you're living in this shit hellhole city and you're working in the factory just like your old man did, well, of course you're going to be given to booze, cigarettes and depression. But if you move and you get a job as being a beach lifeguard on a sunny beach somewhere, then I'm pretty sure your depression will lift in an instant. It's all about circumstances, and that's what Bruce Lipton's hypothesis is about. And I have an adherence to it because I think it's very reasonable, very rational, and I know it to be true. When I've been in negative environments, I have been affected. Every cell in my body and my consciousness and my ego have been massively affected. When I've left those environments, then all the circumstances change. It's environment, people. Now, environment doesn't have to be a physical environment, because at the end of the day, there is nothing that's physical. Our environments invariably are mental, and so you shift your mental environment, you shift your constrained, foolish mental environment that science is the only show in town. Take some drugs. Go on, I dare you. Richard Dawkins, take some drugs, man. And then you have a whole different concept. Brian Cox, Neil deGrasse Tyson, for fuck's sake, take some drugs. And, you know, your world, you'll change because your environment changes, your mental environment shifts. But the thing is, you see, intuitively, unconsciously, they are all God consciousness, and their God consciousness hasn't that experience in line for them. We can't all be spiritually awoken to the nature of God. We've got to have some fools that believe in science and physics and all the rest of it to perpetuate the illusion. If there's no one perpetuating the illusion, then we'll all just end up sitting in caves and staring at the beauty of the mirage that we behold in every day. Now, I could go on and on and on, as you're well aware, but mostly I saved this for the book. And I think what I've dropped on you here is already vastly too much for you to contemplate, comprehend. And so you've got one or two choices. Your ego now can hate me and dislike me and want to chastise me and berate me. Your ego can do that. That's what egos do. Or your higher God consciousness, your true intelligent self, will have just a slither of deep and rich understanding of what I'm saying might just have some reality to it. Only if you had a similar experience to get into that vibration. It's all about vibration. If we don't have the same vibration, then we will never have the same states of consciousness. If we don't have the same states of consciousness, then we'll never see the same worlds, people. And all these things, I mean, to me, they just seem really, really elementary. But maybe I've forgotten, maybe my memory isn't serving me, how I used to feel maybe 14 years ago before I entered onto this path. And somewhere within my everyday consciousness there is now a vast array of information. But all this information is done. It hasn't transformed what I think I know. All it's done is enabled me to see that some people have thought that also, because they've wrote about it. So when I have psychedelic experiences or spiritual experiences or deep meditative experiences, and then when I contemplate, have I had any experience of that in this physical world? And I can say, well, I've read about quantum string theory, and that seems like exactly what you experience. And then you can say, well, I've read about God in the Bible, in the clouds and that, and you've seen that, so okay, you know where these guys are coming from. All these secret priests in the tabernacles, you know, smoking some wacky-backy, and then lording it over everybody else. Well, I know exactly where they're coming from. Because if anybody was smoking DMT 2,000 years ago, then they would very well be within their own rights of assuming that they were connected to God, just like we are today. But the point is, today we've become so detached from the notion and spirit of God because we've got a massive influx of varying mental stimuli, and we've been perverted and corrupted. And now when we are presented with notions of God consciousness and, you know, anybody being in touch with it, oh, I don't believe, oh, how can he think this and how can he know that? And you get all this nonsense. And this is why the vast majority of gurus, they just shut the fuck up. And they just sit in front of the idiot. They charge them £2,000 for a weekend and just take the money off the dumbasses. And then they just answer their dumb fuck questions. Like, every time I try to meditate, I fall asleep. I'd say then, well, fucking meditate when you wake back up again then, cunt. Now fuck off. Come on, is it me? Is it me? If you fall asleep when you meditate, it might just be because you're fucking tired. So sleep until you're not tired and then fucking meditate. For God's sakes. The fucking muppetry of it. Anyway, let's take a deep breath and forgive them, because they know not what they do. The world is given to muppetry because there has to be muppetry if there's going to be genius. And so, just be very grateful, awake and brave, that you are not a muppet, and you can see muppetry, but they can't see you. Muppets can't see you, awake and brave. Why can't they see you? Because they are not in your state of consciousness. They live in other worlds, smaller, more myopic worlds. And, you know, some of them are happy. The ones that are not happy, the ones that are bitter and twisted about other people being outside of their consciousness, well, they maybe should read more, meditate more, take more drugs. That's all I've got to say about that. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, make of this what you will, and put it in your pipe and smoke it.